News family.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, the Home Office are coming under fire today after a report commissioned post the Southport horrors to look at extremism in the UK has basically minimised the main risk from extreme Islamists and instead focused on things like misogyny and hate crime and environmental extremists. I think we need to discuss. And speaking of post Southport, a report out today tells all of us sensible people, quite frankly, what we always knew anyway, that most young people caught up in said riots did so not because they are far-right loons, ladies and gents, no. Instead, apparently, they wanted some kind of cheap, quick thrill. Meanwhile, though, if you ask somebody that was looking at these riots saying, hang on a second, there's a bit of two-tier policing going on in here, you are indeed the far-right extremists. Are you keeping up with this or not? And ONS figures out today show that UK population is going to increase by over 5 million people in the next 7 years due to, you guessed it, immigration. I've got a simple question for you tonight, ladies and gents. Are those people in charge of this country actually losing their minds? Alongside me tonight, my panel, I've got Baroness Jacqueline Foster, the Tory peer and former member of the European Parliament, and Paul Richards, the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 6 o'clock. The top story tonight, well, the UK population could hit 72.5 million people by 2032, driven almost entirely by net migration. According to the Office for National Statistics, net migration will contribute 340,000 extra people each year from 2028. That is up 315,000 than earlier estimates. The government, though, says it will present a comprehensive plan to reduce what it calls staggeringly high net migration levels, but has ruled out a fixed cap. A leaked Home Office report calls for police to record more non-crime hate incidents despite previous concerns over free speech. The report dismisses claims of two-tier policing as a right-wing extremist narrative. The review, ordered by the Home Secretary, also describes grooming gangs as an alleged problem frequently exploited by the far right. Well, the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith, told us the report's conclusion is disturbing.
The Home Secretary needs to publish this immediately so that we can all see for ourselves what and who it is that's saying these non-crime hate incidents, these attack and waste of police resources, something a Conservative Home Secretary stopped. And there's clearly a cell within the Home Office that is not concerned about ordinary crime, ordinary policing, in favour of this ideological approach to non-crime hate incidents. They're wrong. That's not where we should be putting our police resources. And the Home Secretary needs to come to Parliament today, publish this report and explain who it is that keeps coming up with this idea.
The Scottish Government has launched a review of child protection following the conviction of 7 members of a Glasgow child abuse ring. The case, which saw 3 children subjected to horrific abuse in a drug den, has raised serious questions about how authorities failed to act despite clear signs of neglect and school absences. The Scottish Children's Minister says the situation is a horrifying failure and says there is an urgent need for action. MSPs have questioned whether child safeguarding in Scotland is fit for purpose. The government has vowed to ensure lessons are learned and that such abuse never happens again. Well, we've heard the sad news tonight that a British tourist has died after being swept into the sea in Tenerife. The 63-year-old was one of 3 people caught by a powerful wave at a natural swimming pool, with 2 women managing to get back to safety. The alarm was raised just before midday yesterday and emergency services quickly rushed to the scene. But despite their best efforts, the man was pronounced dead. The government is reportedly considering a major shake-up to how the BBC is funded, with households using streaming services like Netflix and Disney potentially being hit with the licence fee. It's reported that the idea is part of a menu of options under discussion, including a tax on streaming services or asking BBC radio listeners to pay the fee. Ministers are also exploring alternatives like advertising or a subscription model as viewing habits slowly shift away from traditional TV. No decisions, though, have been made so far, and the discussions are still in the early stages. Well, an update on the situation regarding Wyn Evans. He has now stepped back, reportedly, from his radio show, from Strictly Come Dancing's live tour and other public commitments, to, he has said in a statement, focus on his well-being. It's after the Welsh opera singer was caught on camera joking about having a threesome with a professional dancer. He has since apologised for that inappropriate remark made during the tour's launch on the 16th of January. BBC producers confirmed Evans received a warning and said his behaviour was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. The 53-year-old since expressed regret and has thanked his fellow performers for their support as he takes what he has described time for self-reflection. And just before I hand you back to Michelle, take a look at this. Boom Supersonic has set the skies tonight in a historic test flight over the Mojave Desert. You can see pictures here of that supersonic flight that could redefine air travel, pushing the boundaries of speed and marking a significant step toward breaking the sound barrier. The XB-1 is expected to create a sonic boom potentially heard up to 30 miles away. And today's milestone comes after 30 successful test flights, 11 rather, including one on January the 10th, where the jet managed to reach 728 miles an hour. Well, as it all went to plan, it means a new 64-seat supersonic jet could soon be taking to the skies, marking the first of its kind since Concorde. Remarkable. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in an hour. Now, though, it's over to Michelle.
I'm that old.
There you go. Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. With you till 7. The person you could hear chattering then as we came back into the show was Baroness Jacqueline Foster, the Tory peer and former member of the European Parliament, alongside her, rather more quietly, I must add, when we came back, following the rules. Thank you, Paul. Paul Richards, the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. The reason that you were just talking, Jacqueline, because we were all watching on then in those headlines, the story about the Boom Supersonic plane. You were telling me about your experience on Concorde.
Well, I spent 25 years with British Airways before I became a member of the European Parliament. And, of course, during those years, Concorde arrived. It cruised at about 68,000 feet, and it flew at twice the speed of sound. So, looking at this, it looks a bit slow to me. Does it?
Look at that. She could probably run quicker. Look at how fit and athletic she is. She's looking at that going, really? You think that that is supersonic? I don't think so. Anyway, look, I want you to get in touch with me tonight with everything that's on your mind. We have a lot to discuss, ladies and gents, and you can join the conversation all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Or, of course, you're very welcome to tweet or X me. And if you need to go out, I hear you, take me out on your radio with you. Look, the first point I want to... I'm sitting here now looking at this aeroplane, and I need to not be distracted by aeroplanes. We're not going on holiday, ladies and gents. We're not trying to break sound or speed records. No, we're trying to focus on getting to the bottom of what on earth goes on in the minds of some people tonight. I'm pondering... There was a leaked report that came out. It was revealed exclusively, I have to say, on the Patrick Christie show here on GB News last night. And it's got many, many people talking. It's been dominating headlines across the day. It was all, of course, we'll remember the horrors of Southport. Off the back of that, our Home Secretary commissioned a report, essentially, to look at extremism, what it means in this country, and crucially, how did that creature, Axel Rudakabana, slip through the net when it came to services like Prevent. Now, this leaked report has really kind of raised eyebrows and got people talking, because what it actually does, it's called the Rapid Analytical Sprint. So if you've been hearing those words today, that's what we're talking about today. And it suggests that the approach to extremism should not be based on ideologies of concern, but instead on a very wide range of behaviours. That's a direct quote I'm giving you there, including things like violence against women and girls, spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories, and so on and so forth. What it does, many are arguing, hence the criticism, many are saying it downplays the real risk of Islamist extremism and plays up things like like, a focus on hate crimes and all the rest of it. I'm going to come to you first, but before I do, let's listen to our Prime Minister speaking out about this today.
When it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously, that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme, and they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my #1 focus.
There's lots of different strands of this report I want to explore, but what's your overall reaction and response to this, Jacqueline?
Well, frankly, it seems to sum up the Home Office. I'm not quite sure what planet they're on. But what you can't do in circumstances like this, and I think I've mentioned before, I've dealt with terrorist issues basically my whole working life and while I've been in politics, and I was responsible for the regulation on basically airport security after 9/11 across Europe. Extremism is extremism. And where I've got a concern is the Prime Minister then came forth and said we'll need to also look at the definition of terrorism. I think and along with many others, are quite clear what terrorism is. You know, you can obfuscate and say, oh, well, you know, maybe it just needs to be moved slightly here or there. But it doesn't. And, of course, it really leads back then to the young man who was the perpetrator of this horrific crime. You know, was it a terrorist attack? Well, my view was, yes, it was. When people are reading al-Qaeda handbooks and looking at how they develop ricin, which can sort of kill half the population, it doesn't come any worse than that. And so I think all of these words about let's redefine this, let's look what extremism is, it's really about, in my view, a lot of jaw, and it's not actually getting to the crux of the matter. This is not how you solve this. What we know is that 94% of terrorist acts where people have been killed in the last 20-odd years have been Islamic terrorist acts. Some of them have been lone wolf, actually. So this whole lone wolf he was talking about, this premise that it's all of a sudden it's new, it's not new. From suicide bombers to others who actually did something and they were alone. So I think it needs to be kept simple. I think, you know, if somebody else says to me lessons will be learned, I think I'll probably cry. But all of these sort of, oh, let's play with this and play with this, that is not the solution. We need to get to the bottom of it. The inquiry needs to be set up. We need to see what the coroner says, and we need to be absolutely clear what we're not going to tolerate in this country.
What you say about lessons being learned, you will have just heard it a second ago on the news bulletins about a completely separate case. But that situation in Scotland, the disgusting grooming gang that's just been sentenced yesterday, hopefully they never get out of prison, that's my view. But again, you're just hearing that yet again, vulnerable children have been failed. It's absolutely appalling. But coming back to this report, Paul, give me your high-level thoughts on it. I want to drill down into some of these strands as we progress the programme, but top level.
Well, first of all, ministers have rejected it. So the first thing we saw today was the leak that had been leaked to the very respected think tank, the Policy Exchange. And they revealed this insider document. But the first thing we heard was that, you know, people like Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, who is a decorated war hero who has commanded men in Afghanistan, said, no, this is not what we are going to do. And Yvette Cooper echoed that as well, and you heard Starmer doing the same. So
that didn't happen straight away, by the way, because Patrick Christie's broke this news.
Well, within hours,
and when
Michelle, you know,
yeah, but what I'm saying
is fast for government.
If you receive a report and you look at it and think, hang on a second, that's on a different page to me, you would have an instant rejection of it. But actually, GBNews tried to contact the Home Office. We didn't get that rejection. That actually came later.
I mean, I've worked in government on these issues inside departments, and I have to say this was relatively fast for government. I mean, government is a slow beast, as we know. But I think ministers have made the right call, which is to say that's very interesting. And, you know, don't forget, advisers advise, but ministers do decide. And in this case, I support their decision because they're saying, no, we do need to focus on the Islamism. We do need to focus on the far right. The point about the lone wolf is well made because the internet now allows it in a way that 30 years ago simply wouldn't have been there. And just picking up Jacqueline's point about definitions, terrorism has changed over 30 years. You know, 30 years ago we were dealing with the IRA, which is an entirely different type of terrorism to then what emerged through Al-Qaeda and then ISIS, and now, you know, some of the Iranian-backed organisations that we're dealing with.
No,
so you do have to think about how it changes.
Not necessarily, because if you run parallel with the IRA, of course they're two very different types of organisations, but the IRA, the Islamic terrorists these days, are doing exactly, over the last 20-odd years here, have done exactly, really, what the IRA did. And what they did, we had the pub bombings. The IRA basically tried to bomb anybody out of existence on the mainland. It wasn't just the troops they went for civilians. And this is what... No, but this is what this is what the Islamic extremists have done here, and they have gone for civilians. So that's where there is a parallel. It's not as though that they're just going for sort of, you know, the armed forces or whatever, because that's not the case.
I think you do need to update your definitions in order to best tackle it, and on that we can agree.
Yeah, but as Dan Jarvis was right, because the definitions actually are pretty clear.
Well, actually, you lead me up nicely. It's almost like we know what we're doing, because that's teed me up nicely, because one of the things that I absolutely want to explore in this report are said definitions, not least the definition of far right and extreme right wing. I would say it'll blow your mind when I tell you what it's being defined as, but it absolutely won't. But it will make you roll your eyes. I'll see you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, after moving to the UK from Kochi in Japan over 25 years ago, our next guest missed the taste of home and started making sushi with local ingredients.
Yes, Tomono Davies went on to establish Tomono Sushi Party, inspired by her mother's dedication to cooking fresh meals every day.
Now, while sushi is usually enjoyed in restaurants in Japan, Tomono is showing that anyone can create it at home. So here we go. She's already taught over 500 people and is now bringing her passion to even more people.
So she joins us now in the studio to give us one of her sushi masterclasses. First of all, we're a little bit nervous. We're certainly not pros. I love eating sushi, but certainly not making it.
As long as you follow my instruction, it should be that easy.
OK, great. That's what we like to hear.
So tell us a little bit about your business and why we're here today.
Of course. So my name is Tomono Davies. I'm originally from the place called Kochi, as you mentioned, and I'm the founder and the owner of Tomono Sushi Party. So we bring authentic, hands-on sushi making classes to homes, offices in London and home counties. Also, we run public classes, the information which you can find on my website.
Yep.
So this goes all the way back in 90s, actually, when I was a student.
Never.
The Japanese food wasn't widely available, but I really craved a beautiful, you know, aromatic aged sushi, Japanese food. And when you're craving something, you started making your own at home. And I fell in love with the Englishman. He brought me back to UK. Then that's the time more people start asking me, can you teach me how to make sushi?
The People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Jacqueline Foster and Paul Richards remain alongside me. One of my viewers, Diana, she says, can we rename Jacqueline the Dame of Common Sense? Wow. Did we used to have a common sense minute? Was it Esther McVey?
Yeah.
Is she still...
Yeah, what happened to her?
She was... Oh, she's still around. Saw her last week.
Never mind what happened to Esther McVey. What happened to common sense?
She was the Minister for Common Sense.
We never actually saw any of it, did we?
Well, she got it all together and then we lost the election.
Yeah, I just feel it's not. That's not a dig at Esther McVey. It's a dig at the lack of common sense right across the board when it comes to those in power across this country. It's really perplexing, you know. We're talking about this report to give it a correct title: a rapid analytical sprint that was conducted in the wake of the Southport atrocities. Now, I just want to show you Richard Tice, MP for Reform UK. Listen to what he had to say today.
Mr. Speaker, so this report that has just been leaked was commissioned by the Home Secretary after the Southport horrors last July. And the truth is that it's come out and all of the recommendations have immediately been basically written off by the Home Secretary. Doesn't that confirm that people in her department are completely out of touch with the wishes of the Home Secretary and the British people?
Now, these people preparing the reports, they're supposed to be impartial, but there's long been accusations that actually there's a lack of impartiality. And in fact, actually, some would say there's quite a left-leaning bias among many of our civil servants. When I go through this report, one of the things that I found really interesting, we talked about definitions just before the break, is the focus of, you know, things like conspiracy theories, extremism, and you guessed it, this whole notion about what they call right-wing extreme narratives. But the examples that they give of said extremist right-wing narratives are people suggesting that there are two-tier policing. It's things like that. It's things like people talking or having concerns about grooming gangs. I mean, some of the language that they use in this report about that is, I would argue, quite shocking. They're talking about alleged grooming gangs and all the rest of it. Don't you feel then, Paul, that that aligns with people's concerns, that actually there's not much impartiality in the civil service?
Well, what you see within the civil service is often groupthink, and you also see an inertia where they've sort of got what they call the departmental view on something, and then ministers come in with a different view, the people who are elected to fulfil the public's wishes, and there is that culture clash within it.
Yes, but hold on, because we also had people like Keir Starmer throwing around the far-right labels like confetti.
Well, hang on, wait a minute. I mean, the story today is this is ministers imposing their view and rejecting the civil service advice and saying, no, what people want to know is we're focusing on the real threats, and that's what the story is. So, yes, this advice has gone up to ministers, but they haven't just gone, oh, yes, OK. They've said, no, that's not what we're going to do, and they've rejected some of the nonsense that you're alluding to in the leaked report.
Yeah, but go on, you're groaning. Go on, Baroness.
They've done well, surely.
I have no issue with the decision that the minister's taken, which I have said. Having said that, when you look at the Home Office and its primary purpose, one of its primary purposes is to look at the security of this country and the people who live here, to come out with a report which says things like alleged grooming gangs, which basically, I mean, I'm apparently far-right. I think about another 80% of the population are apparently far-right, according to the sort of information that's coming out of the Home Office and senior Labour politicians, certainly over the last year or so, with, you know, if we've complained about what's going on with these horrendous marches across London and grooming gangs and all of this. And as soon as, you're quite right, Michelle, as soon as people speak up, you're accused of being far-right because you don't suit that little narrative. And it's just not good enough. And I think we've discussed it before on this show.
I would say it's actually quite dangerous.
It is.
Because when you call just normal, average people that have a kind of legitimate concern, such as we want controlled immigration, not open borders, or we want proper investigations into these rape gangs. When you call those kind of concerns / people far-right, what you then do, I would argue, is you minimise that term, you undermine that term, and then actually the people that actually genuinely are far-right lunatic wrong-uns, they almost kind of essentially get diluted because everyone's distracted over here. So I don't understand why anyone gains from this. But let me ask you this. You see it in America. Donald Trump, he's not having any of it when it comes to the equivalent of civil servants that are on a different page and a different agenda to him. So if we all sit there and we all concede that actually there are people within the civil service that just for whatever reason have a completely different mindset or a warped mindset or a biased mindset, should those people still be in position?
Well, the powers that ministers have are limited in terms of the civil service because it is neutral and it is a permanent institution. But they can set a tone and a direction and a policy, which then the civil service have to follow. And if they don't want to follow that, they can get other jobs. And they can determine up to a point who the permanent secretaries are, who their private officers are, and how the machine works. It takes governments a bit of time sometimes to achieve that because they come in and they're just loaded with briefings and it's quite tough. And I've seen that, happen. But this bunch now seem to be getting a grip, and that's why it's a good news story today that they have rejected this report and said no, we're going to bring a proper political analysis to this, and not just do what we're told by the civil service.
If this report hadn't have leaked, if there weren't journalists, so the likes of Patrick Christie,
we don't know, do we? We've no idea.
What's your guess?
Knowing Dan as I do and knowing Yvette as I do, I would say they would just throw this out, without us. We wouldn't know about it because it would be behind the scenes, but they would reject it as surely as they have publicly today.
So people that have been focused on calling other people far right, you think of their own volition, would have picked up a report focusing on so-called far right and instantly rejected that out of their own...
Well, but there's also if I may say, there's also an issue about Prevent. The organisation Prevent that young boy was referred to. And there was somebody on, actually, who'd worked for Prevent, and they apparently were sort of awarded gold stars if they could find more far-right people when they were looking at apparently doing their job.
Prevent is part of the review that needs to take place.
It certainly needs to be the review, but I think you're wrong on the civil service.
We need more Prevent.
I want to have this conversation properly about Prevent because I think it's such an important point because Prevent is getting the blame in quite a broad spectrum for the failings of Axel Rudiker-Barner, and I do think it needs to be explored. What is the purpose of Prevent? Because surely it's to prevent people becoming terrorists, isn't it? Or is it?
Well,
because this is where it's getting us.
But this isn't the first time.
Hold your thoughts, everyone. It's got national strategies and everything, and I'm excited to hear it. I also want to talk to you about now a report out saying that the young kids that got involved in the rioting, apparently they all did, so many of them did apparently for thrills and not because they are far-right lunatics. I mean, most of us already could have told you that for free. Anyway, look, should those kids have their criminal record scrapped? You tell me. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight, though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and central areas of the UK, eventually dying out through the early hours of the morning, leaving plenty of clear spells. Still plenty of showers, longer spells of rain across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, though. But with clearer skies, that means temperatures should soon dip away, so likely feeling chillier compared to recent nights. Then to start off tomorrow, there should be plenty of dry and bright weather around, still those showers in the north. Just need to keep an eye on this area of rain just starting to clip in to the far southwest during the morning. A mix of dry spells and showers across much of England and Wales, some longer spells of rain around western coasts of Northern Ireland. Similar across the northeast of Scotland, some outbreaks of rain here, likely falling as snow across hills, and a good breeze moving along those northeastern coasts too. But for much of the day, many of us will see plenty of dry weather. Still those showers though feeding in around coasts of Northern Ireland and northeast Scotland, and then it's later on into the afternoon we'll see outbreaks of rain start to clip southern coasts. It's going to be a very wet and windy day on offer across the Channel Islands, so the worst of the weather here, but elsewhere seeing a slightly drier day on offer, and with temperatures round about average for the time of year, though slightly milder across the south. As we head into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure means much more sunshine around, plenty of dry weather once this area of rain moves away from the far southeast. Still can't rule out a few showers, particularly once again around coasts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but for many, plenty of dry weather and lots of sunshine around too. Still some dry weather for Friday, though can't rule out some rain, particularly as we head towards the weekend, and temperatures remaining around average.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems if you're heading northwest away from Edinburgh on the M90, the Queensferry crossing down to a single lane on that two-lane stretch. A multi-vehicle collision is being investigated. I can see emergency vehicles on the camera on the bridge. On the M6 in Lancashire, the two outside lanes are blocked off northbound just before junction 28, the Leyland turn-off at the scene of an accident of queues back to the Charnock-Richards services. In Derbyshire on the M1, the inside lanes blocked off northbound at junction 25, the A52 Nottingham-Derby turn-off, of course, but the entry slip road is also partly blocked. A truck has broken down in the slip road there. On the M6 in Staffordshire, the inside lane's closed southbound from junction 15 to 14 just south of Stoke-on-Trent, where a car's broken down, and the A12 is closed heading out of London at Harold Wood at the scene of an accident near Gubbins Lane. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs and Co. We're with you till 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, in case you're just joining us, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, the Tory peer and former member of the European Parliament, and Paul Richards, the former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. Welcome back, everybody. We're looking in detail tonight at this rapid analytical sprint, also known to you and I as the report that was conducted in the wake of the horrific murders in Southport. It's come under fire because instead of focusing on what many people would call the threats in British society, it's focusing on people's kind of behaviours, if you like, conspiracy theorists, what they're calling, misogynistic people, an interest in gore, and so on and so forth. One of the key points in all of this is the role of Prevent. Paul, I'd like your view on what you think we should actually do to fix this issue with Prevent.
Prevent is one of the strands of contest, and that's the UK's counter-terror strategy. So it's not the only thing we do, but it is one of the elements of it. And the idea is that you try to get to people before they've committed some of these horrors. It obviously has failed in some very key ways that we all know about. But the argument, I think, is not that you then scrap it and say it doesn't work, is you have to do it better and more. So I think it needs more resources and it needs more inspectors, and we need to choke off some of these incidents before they get anywhere near happening. The failure was the failure of Prevent to stop it, not it itself. So I think we need more of it. I mean, it needs to be done better.
But the pushback to that, So Neil Basu, I was looking at something he said. So he's the former counter-terror policing chief, and what he's arguing, and I actually agree with him, is that he's arguing that we have almost like a parallel Prevent. And that one of the challenges with Prevent is that they're trying to shove every wrong-un through Prevent, and that's not what Prevent was supposed to do. Prevent was supposed to prevent people becoming terrorists.
Yeah.
So actually what you're doing is you're shoving anyone that's, I don't know, you've got mental health issues, and William Shawcross, this is one of the things that he has raised as well, that he worries that Prevent is becoming this catch-all for people that are, you know, like almost like mental health challenged, or they need some safeguarding for themselves and whatever. So actually, if we just start expanding it and sticking more resources into it, we're just going to dilute its purpose. So don't we need a second?
I think that's fair, and I think the point that Keir Starmer was making today was about focus, and he used the word focus, didn't he? I think Prevent works if we're very clear on who it is we're trying to prevent, and the strategy is Islamist terrorists, so people who want to bring down the West and establish a caliphate, right, them, and, you know, the far right when it strays into violent extremism, people who want to put bombs into synagogues, right, those people.
Yeah, of course.
And you focus on those groups that we know are a genuine, real threat. And that's the focus. But you need more resource to do that because the threat is growing, as we know, and that's why you need more Prevent.
Jacqueline?
Well, you see, I think Prevent's ended up a bit like a sticking plaster. You've got counter-terrorism people, and they're trying to track about 46,000 would-be terrorists, basically, in this country. And what we've actually got to look at is the cause, because the difficulty that we know we have, because of this rise in Islamic extremism, which is not just in the UK, it's across Europe, and more younger people are becoming radicalised, it's really to prevent that, we actually then have to deal with the other big question about who is in this country. And this is like a whole supply chain, because prevent can't work in isolation. And this is where the great failures have come, in my view, with the immigration policies, certainly over the last 10 or 15 years. And if we don't get a grip on whether it's legal or whether it's illegal migration or immigration into here, we have no idea who is here half the time. We've got tens of thousands of people arriving. There's no security checks. And I have said for years, you know, this is a national security threat.
Yeah, but you know that people blame this on the Tories, don't you?
Of course they do.
This is the issue that so many people have, because I watch all this commentary, I watch a lot of news and current affairs, and I'm always staggered, quite frankly, by the amount of Tories that are sitting here now going on about, yeah, you know, we've lost control of this and that's... And I scream, I'm a bit demented, I scream at my telly, and I'm like, yeah, but you did it, you was in power for 14 years. It's like this strange things happened where people in the Conservative Party pontificate and chin-stroke as though they had nothing to do with the goings-on and as though they weren't in power.
But to be fair, and I don't disagree to an extent, because I was very involved in the European Parliament on this sort of terrorism side in different areas. But also, I've been in the House of Lords for 4 years, and we have tried, at least in the last 4 years, COVID was not helpful because everything was just locked down for 2 years. And this has escalated, I think, really since about 2019. And we were trying, it took us 2 years to get the illegal immigration bill through because the opposition parties, and particularly the Labour Party, were trying to stymie us at every turn. We then tried to get the Rwanda bill through, which we did get through in the end, which actually never went anywhere because we then had an election. So it's not as though they weren't trying to actually do something, because we were trying, and we had no support and no assistance, frankly, from the opposition. So what I won't do is take lectures of the opposition. We know where we should have done things better. We know that our Home Secretaries, we were talking about the Home Office earlier. I mean, they certainly got rid of Amber Rudd and Priti Patel and Suella Braverman pretty quick. You know, every time people were trying to speak up there, and then they were accused of bullying and all of this sort of stuff. It was absolute nonsense. So, you know, it's many, there are many facets here to, I think, to how we've got into this ridiculous position that we're in today. And everything, we need to get a grip from basically from the bottom up. And people need to understand whether they're civil servants or whether they're, you know, there is a responsibility. And that responsibility is for us to make sure this country is safe.
One of my viewers says, Michelle Martin, he's called, the person that wrote that report should be thrown out of the Home Office. Is unbelievably biased. We've just been literally having that conversation. Donald Trump is not backwards in coming forwards when it comes to that kind of stuff, isn't it? Philip, you ask an interesting question. And you started with a simple sentence. It's not yet a crime to be right-wing, is it, Michelle? And I find this really interesting because there does seem to be a sentiment poll that in some people's minds it almost equates to left-wing is good, and if you're left-wing, you're a really great person. And somehow right-wing is bad, and if you have right-wing viewpoints, you're a bad person. What do you think to that?
Well, I just think in our modern politics, we've just got to get over that kind of name-calling and, you know, you're evil because you believe this or that, and it happens on the left and the right. We need to get to a discourse which is polite and respectful and listen to each other's points of view, and where's the points of difference, that's fine. You know, we're good at that on GB News. You get people on from different perspectives and talk it through. But unless we get a civility into our politics.
No, but it comes from the top down, though, doesn't it?
Well, I think it comes from social media, actually. I think it is incubated on social media. People are calling each other names on Twitter, and then they do it in real life.
When you've got the Prime Minister, immediately when people... Just to be clear, because I do need to caveat this, I don't condone rioting on the streets, obviously, full stop. When you have a Prime Minister of this country, though, saying that when people are going out to protest, little girls being stabbed, that essentially they are far right.
But some of them were far right. There was organising by the far right. We know that was the case.
Well, actually...
You know, far-right organisations were incubating this on...
All right, which far-right...
Well, which ones?
No, hold on. Which far-right organisation got people onto the streets of Britain immediately after those little girls were murdered?
The way those kinds of incidents
answer the question.
happen. Well, I don't know the names of the actual far-right organisers, and I'm not going to say it on air, but we know there is evidence of it's been...
Which organisations were they?
Online.
No, right, you see, this is what I think is really, really interesting, because what actually happened... People took to the streets in protest. This is where it all began. They took to the streets in protest. Absolute fury that little girls in this country were not safe. They felt that government policies, i.e. namely uncontrolled immigration, were putting their children at risk.
Who then fuels
that is rightful.
Well,
this is the million-dollar question.
Because
I would say two things. When you watched that Southport protest that descended into a riot, and I would urge all of you to go and look at that footage, go and look backwards, you can see a collection of people that are on the streets, and then what you see in amongst the crowd is you see these people, these men, they are dressed from head to toe in black. They are balaclavaed up, they are masked up, they are concealing their face. They are the agitators. No one really has ever stopped to ask who those people are. Everyone just calls them far-right. That's the first point I would make. The second point that I would make is that there was these rumours going around that there was these far-right groups that were trying to organise people onto the streets. It was a myth. What actually happened, there was at least one person that was prosecuted. He was a guy that pretended to be a far-right lunatic in these groups. He was trying to goad people. He might, and I might have got this wrong, I think, from what my memory is, he was a Muslim chap. I might have got that wrong, but what I do know, he was prosecuted because he was pretending to be a far-right extremist to whip up hatred. So actually, there was so many myths around. And if anyone can get in touch with me and tell me this plethora of active far-right groups that I am missing, I am all ears, because I can't stand the active.
No, can I just come in? No, I'd like to come in on this.
Agitators that come in, and whether it's left or right.
Who are these agitators?
Well, on the left, it's often the anarchists do it, or the Socialist Workers' Party, or other groups on the fractions and the edges of politics, who then try and mobilise what are often quite just decent people who are protesting about something into violence. And you see that on the right as well, because that's been happening for 30, 40 years I've been involved.
Well, nobody's disputing that. Right. But let's get back to the point. And as Michelle quite rightly said, and we saw, if you have then the Prime Minister and you have senior ministers who react when there are circumstances which arise which are very difficult like this, and actually on air turn around and say, well, of course, the people that would be behind all that were all far right. I mean, it is just astonishing.
And the way acted really well.
I'm sorry,
but they closed it down.
Look, I've been in politics. I was involved with the hard left trade unions for many years, so you know I've been across the spectrum in terms of people I've worked with or listened to. You know, at the end of the day, you can't have it both ways. You just can't have it both ways.
And I want to add some context to what I was saying, because I thought I was right, and I am right. There was a conviction of a man who used a fake name to send, and I'm quoting directly in the reports, vile racist messaging on a group. His name was Ehsan Hussain. He identified apparently as Pakistani. He came up with a name, Chris Nolan, on a Telegram group and pretended to be a far-right individual to try and get these so-called far-right people out onto the streets. But he failed, and now he's behind bars
that sounds good,
for 2 years. So what I would say is, I categorically would not deny that there are some people in this country that are far-right. They are vile individuals. I don't support the far-right.
It's a very small number.
Shape or form.
It's a very small number.
I do believe that the number of people that are actually far-right is grossly, deliberately misrepresented to further the agendas of other people. What do you think to it all? Get in touch and tell me. Look, after the break, I do want to look. Chris has just got in touch saying, Michelle, on the BBC News at 6, they didn't even mention that report about the population increase due to immigration. Well, Chris, that's why you should watch GB News, Dewbs and Co, and not the BBC News at 6 then, my friend, because that is exactly what we are talking about after the break.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Another weather system pushing into parts of Western Europe will bring some further heavy rain and strong winds as we go through tomorrow across parts of Western France, much of Spain and Portugal. It is looking wet and there will be some hill snow around too. Also some wet weather affecting southern Italy, feeding into Greece as well. That being said, as we go through later this week, most places will see something a bit drier and also some decent warmth at times too. So not a total washout of a week. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Feathers McGraw, Wallace and Gromit's their villain, has become an unlikely hit at UK tattoo parlours. He's menacing.
He is, yeah.
He's,
and in fact, he doesn't speak, and he's got this glove on top of his head trying to convince us he's a chicken or something.
And that is a real tattoo that someone has decided to have there. What do you two think about tattoos? Are they express themselves? Or?
I love it. So I've basically got Dr. King.
Ah, there we go.
Oh, there he goes. Nice. He's showing us.
If you can't fly, run.
Nice.
Probably slightly more meaningful than having the villainous England.
Oh, come on, Trey, you won't get Feathers McGraw.
Maybe not. It's kind of got that kind of, you know, when you go abroad and you're Ibiza or Magaluf and you and you get a quick tattoo. It's looking like that, yeah. Or like a pirate or something. It's kind of got that vibe, not for me. However, I do get the sentimentality around it. You know, some people have grown up on Wallace and Gromit and they love it and it has meaning. And he is a well-written character, so I get it.
Brilliant, isn't it?
I prefer my tattoos a bit more meaningful.
Bit more, yeah. I feel like as well, there's a surge in it. Lots of people have had it, but then is it then going to become unpopular because of it? And how many people regret the tattoos? Apparently, not just 14% of people regret tattoos.
Wow.
See, I think that's where the meaningful side comes into it. I've got a couple of meaningful tattoos, and I know I will never get bored of them. Not one on my wrist, one on my ankle. They're not hidden, but yeah, I think because they mean something to me, I'll never get bored.
Yes, exactly. I think that's important. If you're gonna, you know, a tattoo's for life, isn't it?
That's the thing.
It's got to mean something.
I'll be indecisive. I think I'll get something.
I want to keep on my body forever.
If I had about 6 or 7 pints and then stumbled into a tattoo parlour,
you'd come out with
something chaotic. A disaster could happen. Then I walk out. Oh no, I've got this for the rest of my life.
You might become addicted.
Well, let's hope not.
Some people do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, Baroness Jacqueline Foster and Paul Richards. Now, the UK's population is set to rise, get this everyone, to 72.5 million people by mid-2032. These figures have been released by the Office for National Statistics, and they say that this will be driven almost entirely by net migration. Now, you do not need to be a statistical genius, ladies and gents, to understand that when you have an island that is literally of finite resource, you cannot just keep stuffing it full of more and more and more and more and more people, whoever those people are, whatever their reason for being here is. But for some reason, that basic fact seems to be evading people in power. Why?
I think it's been such a difficult agenda. And I think we're now just tackling the real problems that have arisen. I mean, over the years, over the decades, migration into this country was relatively slow. And what you did find is, while people might settle together in areas, they were still very open to be the whole British culture. They knew why they were here. That didn't stop people's freedom of religion or using another language or various things like that. And I think what's happened certainly over the last, really since enlargement in the European Union, so you're going back to 2004, when 10 countries joined and then another 2, and then basically it was open borders pretty well. And so you've had more and more people coming through, and then obviously the decision by Angela Merkel, really, which opened the borders, the soft borders, and then we started to have people coming from all over, basically all over the world practically. So it's now between a sort of a rock and a hard place, and it's how do you put the genie back in the bottle? And that is the real challenge. And unless they get really tough, I mean, people may mock Donald Trump, and of course our circumstances are different. We live on a little island here, and we've only got, 20 miles to another coast. But unless politicians get really hard and fast about what we're going to do about this, I can't see the situation improving. And we're also not encouraging or demanding that people that come to live in this country, actually, there is one rule of law, and you either comply to that rule of law or you don't live here. If you don't want to support this country, then don't live here. But there's far too many people who are here, and they seem to hate the place, and yet they're very happy with the benefits system, or they're very happy with whatever. And it's just not productive, and too many people who have immigrated in, and particularly illegal as well. Of course, they can't work, apparently. But, you look at the number of people unemployed who are not, prepared to work. It's just not acceptable.
If I was Prime Minister, that sentence is enough to make your heart sink, isn't it? If I was Prime Minister, honestly, I wouldn't have any working-age, healthy individuals in this country without, if you've got caring responsibilities for your parents, children, whatever, it's different. But if you're healthy, working age, I wouldn't allow you to just choose a life subsidised by a welfare state in this nation. But back to this population increase, it's a choice. It's not a fait accompli that we need to expand our population by these volumes in this way.
Well, the British population has been increasing since the Romans arrived, and we've accommodated the extra millions over the centuries perfectly happy as part of a growing economy. Migration is a good thing, OK? It allows us to grow, and crucially, as our population gets older, we need working-age people working to pay and deliver and pay their taxes to pay for the increasing number of pensioners in this country. If we choked off migration and just put up a big, barrier, if that was possible, then nobody would be around to pay for the pensions.
Well, I've just come up with one solution to that. I'd get all of these people that choose a life of benefits that are physically able to work, I'd get them back to work, so that would bring you some workers in.
Most of the people that come to this country are here to work, and they're here to make a better life. And they bring enormous contributions to our country. The story of our nation after the war is enriched enormously by people who've come to live here.
Yes, because there was a work ethic, because up in the mills, obviously in the northwest,
all kinds of examples, of course.
But that is not the case. We have now. if we look at the Muslim population, 75% of Muslim
doctors, the nurses, the engineers,
hang on, but 75% of women do not work. And you also then have people bringing families in, and they are obviously not of working age. And so it's not true to say there are groups when we look at immigration, and they have been net contributors as such. They are productive. But we also have had, and we were trying to tighten up the rules as well, where there are many people coming in and they are not going to work. And the culture very often does not want them to work. That's the way it is.
I reject that completely. A lot of them are coming here, and of course they don't have access to the normal career paths through the Old Boys network, so they start businesses.
Of course, people start businesses.
Those micro businesses.
I come from a city, a port city, and then I've lived in London, which is a big port city.
Right, but you're
so of course
I'm getting up at 6 a.m. and working really hard.
Oh, I've been up at 6 a.m. and been on my feet for 18 hours. So people do work. What I'm saying is that we have a lot of people who have come here and they are not assimilating in. There are too many people, and they are not lot, looking at the whole culture of this country, and it's just not working.
I mean, I think the argument about speaking English is a good one. I think anyone that comes here should learn to speak English, because that is an access route into the labour market. So that's a good way to get people economically working. And of course, I don't think anyone should be, you know, imprisoned in their own home and not able to speak.
Yeah, but we've got this. We've got cultural issues where we've got forced marriages. We have got polygamy that is happening. I mean, we've got young British children who are then going off to another country during the school holidays and not coming back. You know, these are serious issues that need to be dealt with.
But net migration is a good thing. The population does need to be bigger because it's getting older and we need people to do the work.
Well, there you go. This is a conversation and a debate that will rumble on, and I know that many of you will have very different opinions at home. John, I want to address your point. You've been in touch on Twitter saying Michelle is a disgrace for denying far-right contributed and caused the issues in the summer riot disorder. Let me just be absolutely clear, John. I don't deny that some people in this country are far-right. My issue is that people are lying and misrepresenting the size and scale of the so-called far-right in this country to further their own means. I can give you so many examples, but I'm almost out of time. Keir Starmer said that the far right were essentially being bussed in to create disorder in areas. Well, actually, when you look at where people were prosecuted, most of them were actually locals. One of the far worst experiences I saw in Hull, when they were targeting cars, one of the people there prosecuted was a Moroccan migrant. One of the other people sent to prison was a Pakistani pretending to be a far-right guy to whip it all up. Don't even get me started about the guy from Hope Not Hate making up things about acid attacks. See you tomorrow. No.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading into tomorrow, it's going to be turning wet and windy once again across southern coasts. Brighter elsewhere, though we can't rule out a few showers for some. The reason it's been so unsettled is because we've had low pressure largely dominating the weather, but out to the west we do have a slight ridge of high pressure building, bringing in some finer conditions later on Tuesday through into Wednesday. For tonight, though, still plenty of showers feeding through, particularly across Wales and